The silence in Carnegie Hall was deafening. 5,000 people held their breath as one. On stage, under the brilliant spotlight, a black man in a borrowed suit sat at the Steinway grand piano, his fingers suspended above the keys like a prayer frozen in time. In the front row, Victoria Whitmore gripped the armrests of her velvet seat, her knuckles white. The woman who had called him just a janitor 2 weeks ago now stared at those same hands with something between horror and disbelief. Around her, Manhattan's elite leaned forward in their $1,000 gowns and custom tuxedos, their champagne forgotten, their small talk evaporated into the charged air. The final note of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 hung in the vast space like a crystal about to shatter. Then it faded. And in that pregnant pause before the applause, you could have heard a heartbeat. Then, the room exploded. 5,000 people rose to their feet as one. The thunder of their applause rolled through the hall like a physical force. Grown men wept openly. Critics who had seen 1,000 performances scrambled for their notebooks with shaking hands. In the wings, the other performers stood frozen, their own accomplishments suddenly feeling small. Victoria Whitmore was crying. The woman who never cried, who prided herself on her composure, on her judgment, on her ability to recognize talent, was openly weeping because she had been so wrong. So catastrophically, completely wrong. On stage, Elijah Grant, janitor of Carnegie Hall, let his hands fall from the keys. Tears streamed down his face as he looked up at the ornate ceiling, as if he could see through it to heaven itself. "I did it. Mama," he whispered. "I finally did it." But how did a janitor end up on this stage? How did a man who cleaned these floors end up playing on the most prestigious concert hall stage in America? The answer lies in a story they never saw coming. A story of dreams deferred, talent denied, and one man's refusal to let the world tell him who he could be. This is that story. And it begins 3 weeks earlier in the same building, but in a world completely different from the spotlight. 3 weeks before that standing ovation, Elijah Grant was invisible. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and Carnegie Hall was settling into its nightly silence. The last of the audience had filtered out after a performance by some European virtuoso whose name Elijah couldn't pronounce. The lobby lights dimmed. The security guard, Old Eddie, made his rounds. And Elijah emerged from the janitorial closet with his cart ready to begin his real work. At 32, Elijah had the kind of face that people forgot immediately after seeing it. Not because it wasn't handsome, it was, but because people didn't really look at janitors. They looked through them, around them, past them. In his dark blue uniform, with E. Grant stitched over the pocket pushing a cart full of cleaning supplies, Elijah might as well have been invisible. He started in the lobby, as he always did. The marble floors were scuffed with thousands of footprints. Champagne had been spilled near the coat check. Someone had dropped a program, and it lay crumpled near the entrance, like a broken dream. Elijah worked methodically, his movements practiced and efficient. He'd been doing this job for a year now, and he'd gotten good at it. Good at being invisible. Good at cleaning up after people who would never know his name. Good at ignoring the ache in his chest every time he heard music filtering through the walls. As he worked, the stragglers passed by. Wealthy patrons in furs and diamonds, musicians carrying instrument cases, critics arguing about tempos and technique. Not one of them looked at Elijah. Not one of them saw him. "Excuse me," a woman said, not looking at him as she swept past. Her perfume cost more than Elijah made in a week. She didn't say thank you when he moved his cart out of her way. This was Elijah's world now. The world of after hours, of empty spaces, of being the last person in the building. It wasn't the world he'd dreamed of as a kid in Detroit when his mama had worked 3 jobs to pay for his piano lessons. It wasn't the world his teachers had promised him when they called him a prodigy, when they said he had the gift. But it was his world now, and he'd made his peace with it. Or so he told himself. By 1 a.m., the building was empty except for Elijah and Eddie. The security guard was in his booth by the stage entrance, probably dozing in front of his monitors. The cleaning was done. The trash was collected. The floors gleamed under the dim emergency lights. This was when Elijah's other life began. He parked his cart in the janitorial closet, changed out of his work boots into the worn sneakers he kept in his locker, checked his watch. 1:17 a.m. Perfect. Moving through the darkened halls, Elijah knew every creak in the floorboards, every shadow, every blind spot in the security cameras. He'd mapped them all in his first month, because there was something he needed to do, something he couldn't not do, something that was as necessary as breathing. The door to the main auditorium was never locked from the inside, security protocol in case of fire. Elijah slipped through, and suddenly he was standing in the vast darkness of Carnegie Hall's main stage. 5,000 empty seats rose up into the shadows like a mountain. The silence was complete, absolute, sacred. And there, center stage, under a single dim work light, sat the Steinway Model D grand piano. 9 feet of polished ebony and carefully tensioned strings. One of the finest instruments in the world. Elijah walked toward it slowly, reverently, like a pilgrim approaching a shrine. His heart hammered in his chest. His hands trembled. No matter how many times he did this moment never lost its power. He sat down on the bench, adjusted it slightly, lifted the fallboard to reveal the keys, ivory and ebony gleaming in the low light, placed his hands in position, and then Elijah Grant, Janitor, disappeared. And in his place sat Elijah Grant, Pianist. His fingers found the opening notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Soft, delicate, achingly beautiful. The sound bloomed in the empty hall, and it was perfect. Every note was exactly where it should be, every phrase shaped with the kind of musical intelligence that couldn't be taught. This wasn't the playing of an amateur. This was the playing of a master. For the next hour, Elijah played. Chopin gave way to Debussy. Debussy to Beethoven. Beethoven to Rachmaninoff. His fingers danced across the keys with impossible speed and precision. His whole body moved with the music swaying, breathing, living each phrase. The empty hall listened. The darkness listened. And somewhere, Elijah believed his mama listened. This had been his secret for a year. Every night after his shift, Elijah came to this piano. Every night he played for an audience of ghosts and memories. Every night he remembered who he really was underneath the uniform, and the mop, and the invisibility. What no one knew, what no one could have guessed, was that the janitor who cleaned Carnegie Hall was one of the most talented pianists in America. A prodigy who had been lost to circumstance, buried under necessity, hidden in plain sight for a decade. But secrets, especially beautiful ones, have a way of getting discovered. And Elijah's secret was about to be found out in the worst possible way. To understand how Elijah Grant ended up as a janitor, you have to go back to Detroit, back to a small apartment in a neighborhood where gunshots were more common than birdsong, back to a woman named Dorothy Grant and the son she believed would change the world. Elijah was 8 years old when he first touched a piano. His elementary school had one battered and out of tune sitting in the corner of the music room. Most kids ignored it, but Elijah was drawn to it like metal to a magnet. During recess, while other kids played basketball, Elijah would sneak into the music room and press the keys one at a time, listening to each note fade into silence. The music teacher, Mrs. Patterson, found him there one day. Instead of scolding him, she sat down and showed him middle C. Then she showed him a scale. Then she showed him a simple melody. Elijah played it back perfectly. On the first try. Mrs. Patterson's hands froze on the keys. She turned to look at this small boy with the serious eyes and the worn sneakers. "Do that again?" she said. Elijah did. Perfectly. Nobody's taught you piano before. Elijah shook his head. Mrs. Patterson played a more complex passage. Elijah watched her fingers, then played it back. Every note correct, every rhythm exact. The teacher's eyes filled with tears, because she knew what she was seeing. It was rare, maybe 1 in a million, but it was unmistakable. This child had perfect pitch, natural rhythm, intuitive musicality. This child was a prodigy. That afternoon, Mrs. Patterson went to Elijah's home. Dorothy Grant worked 3 jobs cleaning offices at night, working retail during the day, doing alterations on weekends. She was raising Elijah alone. His father had left before Elijah was born. Money was always tight. But when Mrs. Patterson explained what she'd discovered when she said the word prodigy, Dorothy Grant made a decision that would change both their lives. "He'll have lessons," Dorothy said, "whatever it takes." And she meant it. Dorothy picked up a 4th job. She gave up her phone to save $30 a month. She wore the same 3 outfits for 2 years. Every extra cent went to Elijah's piano lessons. Every sacrifice was made without complaint. Because Dorothy Grant believed in her son, believed in his gift, believed that talent like his deserved a chance. Elijah didn't disappoint. By age 10, he was playing pieces that took most students years to master. By 12, he'd won every local competition. By 14, he was performing with the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, a scholarship student at a prestigious music academy, the youngest person ever admitted. His teachers were unanimous. Elijah Grant would be one of the great pianists of his generation. Juilliard was already interested. Concert halls were already reaching out. A future of international tours and recording contracts stretched out before him like a golden road. Dorothy would sit in the audience at his performances in her worn coat that she'd had for a decade and cry. Not because she was sad, but because she'd done it. She'd given her son a chance. She'd made the sacrifice worth it. "You're going to be somebody, Elijah," she'd tell him. "You're going to make beautiful music for the whole world." Elijah believed her. At 19, preparing for his Juilliard audition, he felt invincible. The audition was scheduled for September. After that, New York City. After that, the world. Then July came, and everything fell apart. Dorothy started forgetting things. Little things at first. Where she'd put her keys, what day it was, the name of their neighbor. Elijah thought she was tired. God knows she'd earned the right to be tired. But then she forgot to go to work. Then she got lost walking home from the grocery store, a route she'd taken 1,000 times. Then one morning she looked at Elijah and asked, "Who are you?" The diagnosis came 2 weeks later. Early onset Alzheimer's. Aggressive. Progressing fast. The doctors were apologetic, but clear Dorothy would need full-time care within months. Within a year, she wouldn't recognize her own son. Within 2 years, maybe 3, she'd be gone. Elijah sat in that doctor's office, holding his mama's hand, and watched his future crumble. The doctors were talking about facilities, about medication, about costs. So many costs. His mama's insurance barely covered anything. The medications alone would cost thousands a month. Full-time care would cost even more. Juilliard faded like a dream at dawn. The concert halls went silent. The golden road disappeared into fog. Elijah made his choice. There was no choice, really. His mama had sacrificed everything for him. Now, it was his turn. He withdrew from the music academy, canceled his Juilliard audition, got a job, then another, then another. During the day, he worked construction. At night, he stocked shelves at a warehouse. On weekends, he drove for a rideshare company. Every cent went to his mama's care. The piano sat silent in their apartment. Elijah didn't have time to play anymore. And when he tried, when he sat down and put his hands on the keys, all he could hear was his mama's voice asking, "Who are you?" The music wouldn't come. The gift felt like a curse. What good was talent if you couldn't use it to save the person you loved most? 10 years passed. 10 years of working multiple jobs. 10 years of watching his mama fade piece by piece, memory by memory. 10 years of being invisible to the world, just another struggling black man trying to make ends meet. Nobody knew he'd been a prodigy. Nobody knew he'd been destined for greatness. How could they? That person was gone, buried under necessity and grief. Dorothy Grant passed away on a Tuesday morning in March 2 years ago. Elijah had been reading to her even though she didn't understand the words anymore, even though she hadn't known who he was in over a year. He was reading from a poetry book she'd loved when he was a child. She took one last breath, let it out slowly, and didn't take another. Elijah sat there for an hour holding her hand before he called the nurse. And in that hour, something broke inside him. Not his heart that had been breaking for a decade, something deeper. Some fundamental belief that sacrifice mattered, that love was enough, that doing the right thing would somehow lead to something good. After the funeral, after the paperwork, after the debts were finally paid, Elijah was alone. 30 years old, no family, no career, no dreams left, just a worn-out body and an empty apartment and a grief so heavy it made breathing difficult. He should have picked up the piano again. His teachers had told him that talent like his didn't disappear, that with practice he could still have a career. But Elijah couldn't. Every time he thought about playing, he thought about what it had cost, what he'd given up, what his mama had given up. The piano had been their dream. Without her, it felt like a graveyard. For 6 months, Elijah drifted. He kept his warehouse job. He paid his bills, he existed. But he wasn't living. He was a ghost, haunting his own life. Then one day he saw a job posting. Night janitor at Carnegie Hall. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady, and something about it called to him. Maybe it was the connection to music, even if it was just cleaning up after it. Maybe it was the chance to be near beauty again, even if he couldn't create it himself. Maybe it was just that the night shift meant he wouldn't have to see people, wouldn't have to pretend to be okay. He applied. He got the job. And that's how Elijah Grant, who should have been playing on the world's greatest stages, ended up mopping their floors instead. For the first month, it was torture. Hearing music through the walls, seeing the grand pianos sitting on stage, watching performers take bows for audiences who loved them. It was like being a starving man working in a bakery. But then one night, after everyone had gone home, Elijah did something he'd told himself he'd never do again. He walked onto that stage. He sat at that piano, and he played. The grief came out through his fingers, the anger, the loss, the decade of silence. He played like a man possessed, like a man drowning who'd just found air. He played until his hands ached and his back hurt and his face was wet with tears. And then he stopped. And in the silence that followed, Elijah realized something. The music wasn't dead. His gift wasn't gone. It had been waiting patient as stone for him to come back to it. From that night on, Elijah played every night after his shift. It became his secret ritual, his private resurrection. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to build a career. He was just playing for himself, for his mama, for the ghost of the boy he used to be. It should have been enough. For a year it was enough. Being invisible during the day, being himself at night. The world didn't need to know. The world had already forgotten him anyway. But the universe has a funny way of disrupting the plans we make. And Elijah's carefully balanced secret life was about to collide with reality in the form of a woman who believed she owned Carnegie Hall. Her name was Victoria Whitmore, and she was about to change everything. Victoria Whitmore didn't just walk into rooms she arrived. At 53, she was the kind of wealthy that came with generations of money, the kind that opened doors before you even knocked. Her family had been Manhattan society since the Gilded Age. Her late husband had been a real estate mogul. And Victoria herself sat on the boards of half a dozen arts organizations, including the Carnegie Hall Corporation. She thought of herself as a patron of the arts. Others might have called her a gatekeeper. Either way, Victoria Whitmore had opinions about who belonged in the world of classical music, and those opinions were carved in stone. It was 2 weeks before the annual charity gala, and Victoria was doing her final venue inspection. The gala was her baby, her pet project, the event that defined her social calendar. Every year she brought together Manhattan's elite for an evening of music and fundraising. Every year, it was perfect. And Victoria intended to keep it that way. She walked through Carnegie Hall like a general inspecting troops, her Louboutins clicking on the marble, her assistant scrambling to keep up with notes. The flowers needed to be orchids, not roses. The champagne needed to be vintage, not the swill they'd served last year. The lighting needed to be warmer. Everything needed to be perfect. And the performers, Victoria asked, not looking up from her phone. All confirmed, her assistant Sarah said. We have the string quartet from Lincoln Center, the soprano from the Met, and 3 scholarship students from Juilliard. Good. Young talent is so important. Victoria said this like she believed it, like she hadn't rejected dozens of applications from young musicians who didn't have the right connections or the right pedigree. And the open slot. The gala always featured one discovery performance. Someone unknown, someone raw, someone who could tell the wealthy donors a heartwarming story about giving back. Victoria didn't actually care about the performer, she cared about the optics, the story. We're still reviewing applications, Sarah said. There are some promising candidates. Just make sure they're appropriate, Victoria said. Remember the disaster 3 years ago? Sarah nodded. 3 years ago, they'd let a jazz pianist perform. The donors had complained. Jazz wasn't serious music, they'd said. Not appropriate for Carnegie Hall. Victoria had learned her lesson. They finished the inspection around 11 p.m. Sarah left. But Victoria realized she'd forgotten her laptop in the administrative office. She could get it tomorrow, but she needed to review the gala budget tonight. So she went back. The building was quiet, empty. The night shift janitor was probably around somewhere, but Victoria didn't think about that. She didn't think about janitors at all. She retrieved her laptop from the office, checked her email, responded to a few messages. It was nearly 2 a.m. when she finally headed back toward the exit. That's when she heard it. Music. Piano music. Coming from the main auditorium. Victoria froze. Nobody should be in there. Nobody was authorized to use the instruments after hours. The Steinway was worth over $200,000. If someone was vandalizing it, if some homeless person had broken in. She moved toward the auditorium quickly, her hand already reaching for her phone to call security. The door was unlocked. She pushed through and stopped. On stage in the dim work light, a man sat at the Steinway. His hands moved across the keys with fluid grace, drawing out a melody so beautiful it made Victoria's breath catch. He was playing Debussy's Clair de Lune, one of the most technically demanding pieces in the classical repertoire, and he was playing it flawlessly. For 30 seconds, Victoria just listened. She'd heard Clair de Lune performed hundreds of times. She'd heard it played by graduates of conservatories, by prize winners, by musicians with walls full of credentials. This was better than most of them. This was extraordinary. Then the man shifted slightly, and the work light caught his face. And Victoria saw what she hadn't noticed in those first 30 seconds. He was wearing a janitor's uniform. The beauty of the music curdled in Victoria's ears. Confusion gave way to shock to anger. A janitor. A janitor was playing the Steinway. A janitor had broken protocol, violated trust, put his untrained hands on one of the finest instruments in the world. Victoria didn't think. She reacted. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Her voice cracked through the auditorium like a whip. On stage, the man's hands froze. The music stopped mid-phrase, the silence after it almost painful. He turned, and Victoria saw his face clearly. Mid-30s, black, eyes wide with fear. I said, "What are you doing?" Victoria strode down the aisle, her voice echoing. "Do you have any idea what that instrument is worth? Do you have any idea how much damage you could cause?" The man stood up from the piano bench quickly, his hands raised slightly, placating. "Ms. Whitmore? I'm sorry, I didn't mean any. You know who I am?" Victoria reached the stage. "Then you know I could have you fired right now. Immediately. You're a janitor. Your job is to clean, not to... She gestured at the piano, so angry she couldn't find words. "I was just playing," the man said quietly. "I wasn't hurting anything. You don't get to decide that." Victoria's voice rose. "You don't get to put your hands on a Steinway Model D because you feel like it. Do you have any training, any qualifications, any right to be anywhere near that instrument?" Something flickered in the man's eyes. Pain, maybe. Or shame. "I used to study," he said. "A long time ago. Used to study." Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do you know who plays this piano prize winners? Graduates of Jules Gliard Curtis, the Royal Academy. People who've dedicated their entire lives to music. Not janitors who used to study." The man's jaw tightened. His hands, which had been so graceful on the keys, clenched into fists at his sides. But he didn't argue. He just stood there taking it. "What's your name?" Victoria demanded. "Elijah. Elijah Grant." "Well, Elijah Grant, you're lucky I don't call the police." "Trespassing vandalism." "I didn't vandalize anything," Elijah said, and there was an edge to his voice now. "I played it. Correctly, carefully. You played it without permission." "That's theft," Theft. Elijah's voice rose slightly. I clean this building every night. I polish that piano. I dust those keys. I'm here more than most of the people who perform on it. And when nobody's around, when it's just sitting here empty, I play. That's not theft. That's what Victoria stepped closer. She was a full foot shorter than Elijah, but in that moment she had all the power, and they both knew it. That's your right. Your privilege. You think because you mop these floors, you're entitled to play on a $200,000 instrument? Elijah looked at her for a long moment, and Victoria saw something in his eyes that unsettled her. Not anger, not fear, sadness, deep old sadness. No, he said quietly. I don't think I'm entitled to anything. I never have been. The way he said it made Victoria pause, but only for a second. She'd come here to find an intruder, and she'd found one. The fact that he played well didn't change that. Plenty of people could play well. That didn't give them the right to break rules. You have two choices, Victoria said. I can fire you right now, or you can agree to never touch any of the instruments in this building again, ever, and you'll take on extra duties for the charity gala in 2 weeks. Set up, break down whatever we need. No extra pay. Consider it your penance. Elijah stared at her. That's not a choice. No? Victoria agreed. It's not, but it's more than you deserve. She watched him process this, watched the defeat settle over his shoulders like a heavy coat. Part of her felt a twinge of something. Not quite guilt, but something adjacent to it. Then she pushed it away. She was being generous. She was being fair. She was giving him a chance to keep his job when she could have him arrested. Fine, Elijah said, finally. His voice was hollow. I agree. Good. And Elijah, I'm having cameras installed to monitor the instruments. If I catch you near any piano again, you're done. Understood. Understood. Then go, now. Elijah walked off the stage past Victoria down the aisle. He moved slowly like a man walking away from a funeral. At the door he paused and looked back. Victoria thought he might say something. Instead, he just looked at the piano. Then he left. Victoria stood alone in the auditorium. She should have felt satisfied. She'd protected the instruments, maintained standards, done her job as a board member, but instead she felt strangely hollow. The silence in the auditorium was complete, and in that silence Victoria could still hear the echo of Clair de Lune, played with a beauty that most trained musicians would never achieve. She pushed the thought away. Talent without credentials was just noise. Rules existed for a reason. She'd done the right thing. Victoria left the auditorium, got her laptop, and went home. She didn't think about the janitor again. Why would she? He was nobody, nothing, just another person who didn't understand how the world worked. But the universe has a sense of irony, and Victoria Whitmore's certainty about who deserved to make music at Carnegie Hall was about to be tested in a way she could never have imagined. Because Elijah Grant wasn't done with Carnegie Hall. Not yet. He had one more performance in him. One more chance to be seen, to be heard, to prove that talent doesn't come with a pedigree. And when that performance came, it would change everything. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of Elijah's life. And that was saying something because Elijah had lived through hard. He couldn't play. The pianos in Carnegie Hall might as well have been on the moon. Victoria had installed cameras like she'd promised, little blinking eyes that watched the instruments day and night. Even if Elijah had wanted to violate his agreement, he couldn't. And the thing was, he didn't want to violate it. He needed this job. Needed the steady paycheck, the health insurance, the routine. Without it, he was nothing. But not playing was killing him. It was like being denied air. For a year, those midnight sessions had been his salvation, his therapy, his reason for existing. Now they were gone. and Elijah felt himself sinking back into the same darkness he'd felt after his mama died. The piano had brought him back to life. Without it, he was just going through the motions again. His co-worker noticed. Robert Washington was 72 years old, black, with hands gnarled by arthritis and eyes that missed nothing. He'd been a janitor at Carnegie Hall for 30 years, and before that he'd played jazz saxophone in clubs all over Harlem. Robert understood what it meant to love music and have it taken away. One night during their dinner break, Robert found Elijah sitting in the janitorial closet, staring at nothing. "You look like you're at your own funeral," Robert said, settling onto a stool with a grunt. "Maybe I am," Elijah said. Victoria Whitmore catch you playing. Elijah's head snapped up. "How did you—" "Son, I've been here 30 years. I know every sound in this building. You think I didn't hear you playing every night? I just never said anything because hell, you were good. Better than most of the people they pay to be here." Elijah felt something loosen in his chest. Someone had heard. Someone had known. "She said I can't play anymore. At all. Said she'd fire me if she caught me near a piano." Robert was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what's funny? Victoria Whitmore thinks she decides who gets to make music, like she's some kind of god. But music doesn't work like that. Music doesn't care about her rules. Doesn't matter if it cares. She has the power." "Does she?" Robert leaned forward. "The gala is in 2 weeks. You know they have an open performance slot." "Yeah, for undiscovered talent. I've seen the applications. Did you apply?" Elijah laughed bitterly. "What would be the point? Even if I got in, Victoria would recognize me. She'd shut it down before I played a single note. Would she?" Robert's eyes gleamed. "Applications are anonymous. They go through Sarah, Victoria's assistant. Victoria doesn't see them until after the selections are made. And once you're on the program, once your name is printed and people are expecting you, would she really cancel in front of all her donors, in front of the press?" Elijah stared at him. "You're crazy. Maybe. Or maybe I'm tired of watching talented people get stepped on because they don't have the right credentials. Maybe I'm tired of people like Victoria Whitmore deciding who deserves to be heard." "I can't," Elijah said. If she finds out before you play, you lose your job. But you're losing yourself anyway, not playing. I watch you, Elijah. You're dying inside. This job isn't worth that." Elijah wanted to argue, but he couldn't, because Robert was right. These 2 weeks without the piano had shown him something terrifying. He couldn't live without music. He'd rather be homeless. He'd rather be starving than go back to the emptiness of never playing again. "How would I even apply?" Elijah asked. "I don't have recordings. I don't have credentials. You have a phone, don't you? Record yourself on that. Send it in. Use your initial and last name, E. Grant. Let the music speak for itself." It was insane. It was dangerous. It was probably career suicide. But that night after his shift, Elijah went back to his tiny apartment. He set up his phone on a stack of books. And in front of his mama's old upright piano, the one she'd bought for him when he was 10, the one she'd worked 4 jobs to afford, Elijah recorded himself playing. He chose Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, his mama's favorite. The piece he'd been planning to play for his Juilliard audition all those years ago. He played it from memory, every note still there after a decade of silence. When he finished, his hands were shaking. He listened back to the recording. The phone's microphone didn't do it justice. The sound quality was poor, but the music was there. The feeling was there. If someone listened, really listened, they would hear it. Elijah filled out the online application. Under name, he wrote E. Grant. Under background, he wrote former student, self-taught since. Under. Why do you want to perform at Carnegie Hall, he wrote. Because I belong there. Then, before he could change his mind, he hit submit. For 3 days, Elijah heard nothing. He went to work. He cleaned. He avoided Victoria, who was at the hall constantly now micromanaging every detail of the gala. He tried not to hope. Then on Thursday, Sarah, Victoria's assistant, posted the gala performance schedule in the break room. Elijah wasn't supposed to look. Janitors weren't supposed to care about performance schedules, but he couldn't help himself. He scanned the list. String quartet, soprano, Juilliard students, and there, second to last, E. Grant piano. Elijah's heart stopped, then started again, pounding so hard he thought it might break his ribs. He'd gotten in. He was going to perform at Carnegie Hall. The realization hit him in waves. First joy, then terror, then a kind of calm certainty. This was it. This was his one chance, his last chance. A decade after he should have had his debut, after he'd given up everything after the world had forgotten him, he was going to play on the stage where he belonged. Victoria would be there. She would recognize him. She would probably try to stop him. But Robert was right. Once he was on that program, once his name was printed, once people were expecting him, it would be harder for her to simply erase him. He had one shot, one performance. 10 years of grief and sacrifice and silence, all distilled into 12 minutes of Rachmaninoff. It had to be perfect. For the next 10 days, Elijah prepared. He couldn't practice at Carnegie Hall, but he could practice at home. Every night after work, he played his mama's old upright until his fingers ached. He played until the notes were so deep in his muscle memory that he could perform them in his sleep. He played until the piano, and his hands were one thing indivisible. Robert helped him find a suit. It was old, borrowed from Robert's own performing days, but it was clean, and it fit well enough. Elijah looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man looking back. Not a janitor. A pianist. You ready? Robert asked the night before the gala. Elijah thought about his mama, about the teachers who'd believed in him, about the 10 years he'd spent invisible, about Victoria Whitmore's face when she'd told him he didn't belong. Yeah, Elijah said. I'm ready. But he wasn't. Not really. Because what Elijah didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that the next night would test him in ways he couldn't imagine. It would require every ounce of courage he had. And it would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone who witnessed it. The gala was coming. And with it, a reckoning. The night of the gala, Carnegie Hall looked like something from a dream, or a nightmare, depending on your perspective. White lights wrapped every column, red carpets rolled down the stairs, photographers clustered near the entrance, their cameras flashing like lightning, and the guests arrived in a parade of wealth that would make most people's annual salary look like pocket change. Women in gowns that cost more than cars, men in tuxedos tailored to their exact measurements, jewelry that had its own insurance policies, fur coats despite the mild October weather. These were Manhattan's elite, the people who decided what counted as culture, who determined what art mattered. And tonight, they'd come to feel good about themselves by giving money to young musicians while sipping champagne that cost more per bottle than those musicians made in a month. Elijah arrived through the service entrance at 5 p.m. The gala started at 7:30. Performances began at 8. He was scheduled for 9:15. 2 hours and 15 minutes to not lose his nerve. He was still in his janitor's uniform, still had work to do. Victoria had meant what she said about extra duties. Elijah spent the first hour helping set up chairs, checking microphones, positioning music stands. The other janitors did most of the work, but Victoria seemed to take special pleasure in giving Elijah the most visible, most humiliating tasks. Elijah, that chair is crooked. Fix it. Elijah, there's a scuff mark on the stage. Clean it. Elijah, the programs need to be straightened. She didn't look at him when she gave orders. She never looked at him. To Victoria, Elijah was just furniture that occasionally needed adjusting. What she didn't know was that this invisible janitor she was ordering around was on her performance program. What she didn't know was that in less than 3 hours, she'd be forced to see him. Around 6:45, Elijah slipped away to change. He'd hidden Robert's suit in his locker. He changed in the tiny janitor's bathroom, his hands shaking so badly he could barely button his shirt. The suit was a little loose in the shoulders, a little short in the arms, but it would do. He looked at himself in the scratched mirror. He looked terrified. "Mama, if you're watching," he whispered to his reflection, "help me not mess this up." The backstage area was chaos. Performers warmed up in practice rooms. The string quartet argued about tempo. The soprano did vocal exercises. Everyone was in performance mode, that specific cocktail of adrenaline and terror that comes before walking into the spotlight. Elijah found an empty corner and tried to breathe. He could hear the audience filing in. Voices, laughter, the clink of champagne glasses. These people didn't know him, didn't know his story. In a few minutes, they'd see him as just another performer, another face, another set of hands on a piano. But Victoria would know. The moment he walked on that stage, she'd know. Grant Elijah looked up. It was Sarah Victoria's assistant clipboard in hand. She smiled at him. "I'm so glad you made it. Your application was one of my favorites. That recording was extraordinary." "Thank you," Elijah managed. "Have you performed at Carnegie Hall before, number first time?" "Well, you're going to be amazing, I can tell." Sarah checked her clipboard. "You're on after the Juilliard students. There'll be a 2-minute transition. When you hear your name, walk straight down the center aisle to the stage. The piano is already positioned. Any questions? No." "I'm good." Sarah squeezed his shoulder. "Break a leg." She walked away, and Elijah was alone again. He closed his eyes, tried to center himself, tried to remember why he was doing this. For his mama? For the boy he used to be? For every kid like him who'd been told they didn't belong? For everyone who'd ever been invisible? The gala began. Elijah could hear the MC's voice through the walls, welcoming the guests, thanking the donors. Then the music started. The string quartet first playing something light and pleasant. Then the soprano, her voice soaring through an aria. Then the Juilliard students, 3 of them performing a piano trio. Each performer got polite applause. Appreciative, but not enthusiastic. This was background music for the wealthy, something pleasant, while they sipped champagne and talked about their vacation homes. Then the MC's voice again. "Ladies and gentlemen, our next performer is a special discovery. Grant is self-taught and will be performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Please welcome Grant." This was it. Elijah stood. His legs felt like water. His hands were ice. He walked toward the stage entrance, and suddenly he was in the wings looking out at the auditorium. 5,000 people. 5,000 faces he couldn't see in the lights. 5,000 witnesses to whatever was about to happen. Elijah stepped onto the stage, started walking down the center aisle toward the piano. The applause was polite, scattered. And then from the front row, a voice cut through the noise. "Oh my God." Victoria Whitmore's voice. Elijah didn't look at her. didn't let himself see her face, but he heard the shock in her voice. The recognition, the disbelief. Whispers rippled through the crowd, people leaning to their neighbors. Is that the janitor? What's going on? Elijah kept walking. The stage lights were blinding. The piano waited. Just a few more steps, just a few more seconds. He reached the piano, sat down, adjusted the bench. The whispers continued. Someone in the audience laughed, uncertain. Someone else said, "Is this a joke?" Elijah looked out at the sea of faces, found Victoria in the front row. She was half standing, her face a mask of fury and shock. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Elijah made a choice. He wasn't running. He wasn't apologizing. He wasn't asking permission. He was playing. Elijah placed his hands on the keys, closed his eyes, and disappeared into the music. The first notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 are soft, delicate, almost shy. They creep out like dawn breaking, like hope whispering in the dark. Elijah's fingers found them perfectly, each note clear and crystalline. And in that moment, the whispers in the audience stopped. Carnegie Hall fell silent. Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto is one of the most beloved pieces in the classical repertoire. It's also one of the most technically demanding. The opening builds slowly, piano notes rippling like water, then strings sweeping in, then the full orchestra. But Elijah was alone. No orchestra. Just him and the piano, which meant every note was exposed, every phrase naked, every mistake would be obvious. There were no mistakes. Elijah's hands moved across the keys like they were born there. His fingers danced, flute sang. The soft opening gave way to the first major theme, and suddenly the music was everywhere, filling the hall with a sound so rich and full, it was hard to believe it came from just one person. In the front row, Victoria Whitmore sat frozen. Her mouth was half open. Her face had gone pale. Because what she was hearing was impossible. Janitors didn't play like this. Self-taught musicians didn't play like this. This was the playing of a master, a virtuoso, someone who'd spent their entire life dedicated to their craft. Who was Elijah Grant? Around her, the audience was having the same realization. The uncertainty, the whispers, the confusion, all of it evaporated in the face of what they were hearing. This wasn't amateur hour. This wasn't some charity case getting a pity slot. This was real. This was extraordinary. Elijah didn't see them, didn't hear them. He was somewhere else entirely. With each phrase, he was back in his childhood home, his mama sitting in the corner, mending clothes while he practiced. With each crescendo, he was at his first recital, nervous and small, his mama in the front row crying with pride. With each delicate passage, he was in the hospital room playing invisible keys on his mama's hand while she slept, while the Alzheimer's stole her piece by piece. This wasn't just Rachmaninoff. This was Elijah's life story told through another man's notes. Every loss, every sacrifice, every midnight at the piano while the world slept, every moment of being invisible, of being told he didn't matter, of being forced to hide his gift like it was something shameful. All of it poured out through his fingers. The concerto moved into the second theme, slower, more romantic. This was the part that made people cry at concerts, the melody that showed up in movies and commercials, because it was so achingly beautiful. Elijah shaped each phrase with impossible care, pulling emotions from the piano that most people didn't know instruments could hold. In the audience, people were no longer sitting back in their seats. They were leaning forward. A woman in the 5th row had tears streaming down her face. A renowned critic in the balcony had stopped taking notes and was just listening, his mouth slightly open. Even the performers backstage had stopped talking, stopped warming up, stopped everything to listen. Because they all understood what they were witnessing. This was rare. This was once in a generation. This was the kind of performance that people would talk about for years, that would become legend. The night a janitor walked onto the Carnegie Hall stage and proved that talent doesn't ask permission, doesn't wait for approval, doesn't need anyone's blessing to exist. Victoria's hands were shaking. She wanted to feel angry. She wanted to maintain her outrage, her sense that rules had been broken, that this was inappropriate. But she couldn't. Because the music was devastating her defenses, breaking down every wall she'd built, forcing her to confront a truth she'd spent her life avoiding. She had been wrong. So completely, utterly wrong. This man, this janitor, she'd dismissed this person she'd threatened and humiliated, had more talent in his smallest finger than most of the credentialed, pedigreed performers she'd championed over the years. And she'd almost silenced him, almost erased him, almost committed the cardinal sin of art-destroying beauty because it came from an unexpected source. The concerto built toward its climax. Elijah's entire body moved with the music now. He swayed, he leaned, he breathed with each phrase. His face, visible in profile to the audience, showed everything: pain, joy, loss, hope. He wasn't performing anymore. He was testifying. The famous cascade of notes came the part that sounds like water falling like stars streaming across the sky. Elijah's fingers blurred across the keys, impossibly fast, impossibly precise. Not a single note dropped, not a single phrase rushed. It was perfection. In the backstage area, the Juilliard students who'd performed earlier stood in the wings watching. One of them, a young woman who'd won every competition she'd entered, whispered to her friend, "How is he doing that?" "I don't know," her friend replied, "but we just got shown up by a janitor." The climax built and built. The piano sang, shouted, soared. Elijah was giving everything, holding nothing back. This was it. His one shot. His one moment. If they were going to see him, they were going to see all of him. The final section arrived. Softer now. Reflective. The storm passing, leaving only beauty in its wake. Elijah played these last phrases like a prayer, like a goodbye, like a love letter to his mama, and to music, and to the part of himself he'd thought was dead, but had only been sleeping. The last note, soft, hanging in the air like a feather floating down. Elijah's hands lifted from the keys. The sound faded. Silence. 3 seconds of absolute, complete silence. 5,000 people holding their breath. And then the hall exploded. The applause hit like a physical wave. 5,000 people rose to their feet as one, and the sound of their ovation was deafening. It rolled through Carnegie Hall like thunder, like ocean waves, like the roar of a crowd at a championship game. Elijah sat at the piano, stunned. His hands were still raised above the keys. Tears streamed down his face. He'd expected applause, hoped for acceptance. But this was something else entirely. People weren't just clapping, they were shouting, whistling, stamping their feet. In the boxes, wealthy donors who usually maintained decorum were standing on their seats. The critics in the press section were on their feet, applauding with everyone else. The other performers backstage rushed into the wings, joining the ovation. And in the front row, Victoria Whitmore stood and applauded. Her face was wet with tears. Her carefully applied makeup was running. She looked like she'd been hit by a truck. But she was clapping. She couldn't not clap, because she'd just witnessed something that happened maybe once a decade, if that. A performance so transcendent, so emotionally devastating, so technically perfect that it erased every other consideration. It didn't matter that Elijah was a janitor. It didn't matter that he had no credentials. It didn't matter that Victoria had tried to silence him. All that mattered was the music. And the music had been undeniable. Elijah stood, bowed. The applause somehow got louder. People in the audience were crying openly now. A man in the balcony shouted, "Bravo!" Others picked it up. The MC tried to speak to introduce the next performer, but nobody was listening. The audience wouldn't stop applauding. They didn't want this moment to end. Finally, the MC gave up and simply gestured to Elijah. "Ladies and gentlemen, E. Grant." The ovation continued for 3 more minutes. 3 minutes of sustained applause, whistles, shouts. It was unprecedented. Even at Carnegie Hall, where audiences had heard some of the greatest musicians in history, this was special. Finally, slowly, the applause began to fade. People sat down. The hall quieted. Elijah, overwhelmed, walked off stage. As he passed Victoria, their eyes met. She mouthed something. He couldn't hear it over the residual noise, but it looked like, "I'm sorry." Backstage was chaos. People mobbed Elijah. Other performers wanting to shake his hand. Stage managers congratulating him. Someone thrust a bottle of water into his hands. Someone else wanted his contact information. It was overwhelming. Then Sarah Victoria's assistant pushed through the crowd. "Elijah, Ms. Whitmore would like to speak with you. In private, after the gala." Elijah nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. The rest of the gala passed in a blur. There were other performances, but nobody was paying attention. The audience was still processing what they'd witnessed. The final performer, a vocalist, actually acknowledged it, saying into her microphone, "Following that is impossible, but I'll try." When the gala ended, when the last guest had filtered out, still talking about the janitor who'd stolen the show, Elijah found Victoria in her office. She was sitting at her desk, her face cleaned of tear-stained makeup, looking smaller somehow than she had before. "Elijah," she said, "please sit." He sat, waited. "I owe you an apology," Victoria said. "More than an apology. I owe you, I don't know what I owe you, for what I did, for what I said, for trying to silence you." Elijah didn't speak, just watched her. "I thought I knew what talent looked like," Victoria continued. "I thought it came with credentials, with pedigrees, with the right training from the right schools. I was wrong, completely wrong. She paused, struggling for words. "You're one of the most talented musicians I've ever heard, and I almost destroyed you." "You didn't destroy me," Elijah said quietly. "You couldn't. Because music doesn't work like that. It doesn't care what you think. It doesn't need your permission." Victoria flinched. "No, it doesn't. And I'm sorry I acted like it did." She took a breath. "I want to make this right. I have connections. I can make calls, get you auditions, recordings, concert bookings. I can help rebuild the career you should have had." "I don't want your help," Elijah said. Victoria looked stricken. "Then what do you want? I want to not be invisible anymore. I want to play. I want kids who look like me to see that they belong on stages like this. I want people to understand that talent doesn't come from wealth or connections or the right zip code. It comes from work, from sacrifice, from loving something so much you can't not do it." He paused. "I don't need you to give me a career, Ms. Whitmore. I just needed you to get out of my way." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "You're right. And I will. Get out of your way, I mean. But Elijah, whether you want my help or not, what happened tonight? It's already started. The press was here. Critics were here. By tomorrow morning, you're going to be famous." She was right. By the next morning, Elijah's performance was viral. Someone had recorded it on their phone. Within 12 hours, it had 10 million views. News outlets picked it up. Janitor's secret, Carnegie Hall's most moving performance in years, hidden genius, the janitor who stunned New York. Offers poured in. Concert halls, recording studios, television appearances. Juilliard offered him a full scholarship to finish his degree. The Curtis Institute wanted him as faculty. Symphony orchestras wanted him as guest soloist. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying. It was everything Elijah had dreamed of as a child and thought he'd lost forever. 6 months later, Elijah performed at Carnegie Hall again. This time it was his concert, his name on the marquee, his program. Every seat sold out in under an hour. Before he went on stage, he stood in the janitor's closet looking at the uniform hanging there. Robert had kept it for him as a reminder. "Don't forget where you came from," Robert had said. Elijah wouldn't forget. Couldn't forget. Because his story wasn't just his. It was every person who'd been told they didn't belong. Every talent that almost got buried under circumstance. Every dream that survived against impossible odds. He walked onto the Carnegie Hall stage that night to a standing ovation before he'd played a single note. He sat at the Steinway, the same piano he used to clean the same piano Victoria had tried to keep him from. And he played, not just for himself, not just for his mama, but for everyone who'd ever been invisible, who'd ever been told no, who'd ever had to fight just to be seen. The music filled Carnegie Hall, and everyone listened. Because true talent needs no pedigree. Music doesn't see color or class, and dreams don't wait for permission. They just need someone brave enough to chase them. Elijah Grant was that someone, and his story was just beginning.